Men with multiple wives. I was interested in finding out what motivated men to enter into polygyny. Most of us think that men want to get into polygyny for sex and ego. Some of them might not admit that, but in these three communities, the men talked about the desire to take care of women. Like, for example, one man said, how could he sit up all happy and cushy with his wife and family when he knew there was multiple women out there that needed to be a part of a family. And one guy expressed the need to care for women because of what he saw his mother go through. He said that as a single parent, she went through a lot, and he expressed his wish to marry all African American women because it really hurt him to see women without having the love and support of a husband and a family. And in this particular situation, the guy actually married a woman who was 13 years his senior. One of his wives was a woman who was 13 years his senior. Circumstances, they thought pooling their resources was polygyny would help because it was a way for them to pool their resources. And also, if they were already functioning like a family, then why not just make it a family situation? So, for example, I'm thinking if he was married and then there was a sister that they were already helping that was a part of their family, then why not make her a part of the family? Spiritual suggestions from husbands and wives through meditations, dreams. I guess they would, through meditation and dreams, a sister or something would come to them. And then men also said that the wives would all desire to bring another wife in. And so this was also a motivating factor for them. So how did they enter into polygyny? One of the things that the men in a couple of the communities discussed was letting the already existing wife know of their interest as soon as possible. And they would ask their wife, like, how do you feel about sister so-and-so? Or I'd like you to get to know sister so-and-so. Or tell me what you think about. So those were some of the reasons in terms of how they would enter into it. When a husband was interested in pursuing another wife, he said that it's not a decision that he makes, it's a decision that we make. And so you say, I don't bring another wife into the family, we bring a new wife into the family. They also did spiritual consultation. In one community, the oracles was significant, so they consulted the oracles. And also the wives made suggestions. And wives might pursue women for different reasons. Sometimes a person will be just talking in a casual way and say, you know what, we should invite sisters so-and-so to come to our family. We need to get her on our team. And so as I said in the section where I dealt with the women, a lot of times women wanted to bring other wives in because they thought that they had some good attributes and a skill set that they thought would be good, beneficial to help their family. So some of the challenges and difficulty that the men faced, one of the things that they talked about is that you could feel like you can lose yourself in polygyny. And so they talked about dealing with all the different personalities. One described it as very troublesome, and very challenging and emotionally taxing. Women also changing their minds after entering into polygyny. They say they can deal with certain things, and then when they get in it, they have difficulty dealing with it. And they also talked about the importance of staying out of the women's affairs. Issues with children can also be astronomical because different parenting styles, people have different parenting styles, different discipline styles, different goals for the children. And he said you have to be consistent in your approach to children, to the diet, to discipline, what they watch on television, their education, and you got to also deal with other children's fathers. And so just a whole slew of things you have to deal with if you're going to get into a polygynous situation, particularly with women who already have children. One guy said, if you don't have any money, stay the hell out of polygyny because it's tough. And although you're not expected to take care of everybody, you still have to maintain some kind of financial consistency, and you have to have a plan. One guy described it like this: you ain't Superman. And so men are also concerned with their physical appearance, their health. As you get older, you start to be concerned about prostate cancer, heart conditions, and things like that. They're especially concerned about their potency because some women, although women might not want it all the time, but they want it when they want it. Diet was also stressed a lot, and one guy actually said that they believe they could have saved the marriage had they just had some understanding about PMS. And so people have to really pay attention to, of course, health issues in the diet. Balance and fairness. And they talked about, of course, it's very important for men to have a sense of balance and a sense of fairness and a sense of what's just. But but the women have to help you. He said no man can honestly say that he's not attracted to one woman over the other, and it could be for just a number of reasons. That they like something about how she looks, or like how she makes love, or he likes the way she cooks. And so there's different ways in which reasons why they might like women, but they have to be balanced. Men must be mindful and not follow their instincts, and they must have a sense of what's fair play. They have to also follow the spiritual consultation in one community, of course, the oracles, whatever the issues might be, in terms of helping him to stay balanced and fair. Having a schedule helps. So even if you have some issues that are going on in the family, but having a schedule in terms of the alone time that he's going to spend with the different women or the different wives, and in terms of also, when they're in the bedroom. But they talked about also, even though you have the schedule, you also have to bring quality into the interaction. So it just sounds like it's a whole lot for a guy or a man who wants to take on multiple wives. But the most significant thing, they said that his spiritual focus is paramount, because it's God that she sees in him that helps to keep her balanced. Time arrangements. So of course the house is shared. So the women and the husband and the wives spend time together all day. But the difference is if they have some alone time, or they just have the time to themselves. But also the difference is the time that they're going to share the bedroom. And so, depending on how many wives you have, will determine how much time each wife spends with the husband in the bedroom. So, if you have 3 wives, they might spend 10 days with the husband. If you have 2 wives, then you might spend 2 weeks at a time, or a week on and a week off. But there also may be a lot of flexibility. For example, a husband might need his own alone time, and even have his own room if he can. But in particular, they talk about how he just might fall asleep on the couch. And so I think over time, as people get really acclimated to each other, and they really are comfortable with the situation, a lot of that stuff begins to not be so much of an issue. But having a schedule, regardless, helps keep things on point. Perspectives. I wanted to ask men just their perspectives, because we know of the people believe that men get involved in polygyny for sex and for ego. But one of the things they said, that even if you do that, this is not going to sustain you. They said this is going to get worn out, and it may be fun for a while, but then you're going to realize that there's a person here who has a destiny and have things to do. So you have to be able to sustain a family. You have to have all the characteristics that we just talked about to be able to sustain a family. And they said if you wanted to just if men wanted to just for ego and sex, and all they had to do is get a Mercedes-Benz or a Rolex watch, or all those, whatever those things that they think that attract females, and do it the way men do it. And so, but when you're really a part of a family, then that means now you have to be responsible, and you have to care for multiple women and multiple children. And so it causes a higher level of accountability versus just having women that you not necessarily have to be accountable to. And of course, the way we do it in the U.S. society, without having to be accountable to them morally, legally, spiritually, emotionally, financially. So you put all that together. If you don't have the capacity for all that, then you probably need to not even consider polygyny. What would you tell men considering polygyny? One guy said that you have to have women's skills, and they also said you have to pray a lot. They must stay focused on spiritual strength, and they must focus on their health. And then I asked the question of what do they think about, because of course people are always going to ask the question, well, what about women having multiple husbands? Well, some of them talk about their concern about inbreeding, but they also didn't believe that women could meet the demands of multiple husbands and children. Some thought that women might be able to meet the sexual demands, but they would not be able to meet the demands of multiple husbands with multiple children. It's interesting, when I remember having this discussion in class, one of my classes, and a sister was, absolutely, totally and completely opposed to polygyny, which is understandable because we're living in this culture and the way we've been conditioned to think about it. But I remember seeing that same sister as time went on during the semester. She was pregnant, and she came in, we was having a discussion, and she was almost falling over talking about having multiple husbands. And so that right there answered the question for me. So what is necessary for polygyny to work? In all three communities, they said it should be practiced in a community where you have a structure put into place, and it needs to be in some larger spiritual religious community or social or community, because people need to have social and community support. Pre and post-marital counseling was absolutely necessary, and one community again had the oracles, and that was used to help determine whether or not individuals should marry. But they needed also to have formal counseling. In one community, you had to have at least 10 sessions before a priest and get spiritual counseling before you got married. But there's so many things that need to be talked about, and I think that this is not just the case for polygyny, but also for monogamy, which is why people get married, and then they discover all these things after they get married because they didn't have some kind of counseling to help them really explore what their ideas and values were around a number of issues that will arise once you get married. So they talked about legal matters, finances, and issues related to children needed to be discussed prior to a marriage. Space, with regard to space, some of the women who were living in the same household thought it would be better if women had their own space, because then it would eliminate conflicts around children and the house cleaning and feelings of jealousy. But when I interviewed women in the Muslim community, and many of them were not on the same page and did not consent to their husband, they talked about how it felt like they were losing their husbands because they were spending time out of the family. So, for example, I remember one woman who was in her 50s who had never worked, and her husband had been the primary breadwinner. And then once he married once he married another wife that she was not in agreement with, he started staying away from the house. So now she went from having a full-time husband to a part-time husband. And then she for the first time, had to enter into the workforce. And so, it just depends. But I think what's critical in all these situations is that women be on the same page. If they're not on the same page, or if they don't consent to polygyny, then of course that's going to create whatever conflicts that there are, they're going to be exacerbated. Wives have to have a good relationship. The men thought that the wives had to have a good relationships, and the women also thought that was critical, because of course if women are not getting along, that's going to create a whole lot of problems. And so it's important that women have a relationship with each other and try to have at least a good relationship. If not a good relationship, if they don't feel like they're really close, at least a very cordial relationship. But ultimately they said what's significant for polygyny to work is that women have to want for your sister what you want for yourself. And ultimately, God has to be at the center.